thing is, the guest that we have today, Romulus Whitaker, we tend to normally introduce him or people introduce him as the snake man of India, which to my way of thinking is accurate, but it's insufficient. Because for more than 6 decades, Rom has worked with some of the animals that human beings fear the most. Snakes, there are crocodiles, gharials, king cobras, venomous snakes of all descriptions. But if we see just that, if we see that he is only working with snakes and crocodiles and whatnot, we don't realize that these animals, individually and collectively, open doors into much larger worlds. They don't just stop.
Yeah. Yeah, and like the snakes lead to the Irulas, whose ability to read a landscape it's basically generations of accumulated observation. They can spot a snake from like way beyond any one of us can spot, and they can actually tell how species are different as well. And then, of course, the question comes down to venomous snakes, and non-venomous snakes. And then venom, when you talk about venom, immediately you think of antivenom. And he's worked in that too. And then and the fact that there are tens of thousands of Indians who die every year from snake bite, and he's involved in that too. And then comes the king of them all, the king cobra, which is from the forests of the Western Ghats. He's worked there too. He was, of course, the person who started the Agumbe Rainforest Research Station, ARRS, which is a fabulous place. And then, of course, something that when he talks about, which really sticks with you, is that he talks a lot about forests and rivers.
Yeah.
The landscapes. And then when you talk about rivers, you can't not talk about gharials, which are the fish-eating crocodiles of India and endemic to those areas. He's worked there too. And then you come back to where he was based out of for a long time, Chennai, Madras Croc Bank that he started. And then, it comes to the beaches and sea turtle nesting and, how do you conserve sea turtles and protect those nesting sites, and he's worked in that too. And then the minute you talk about that in the current dispensation, that immediately leads to Great Nicobar, right? And that's something that we have talked about. We've done a whole episode on that. Please do watch that if you haven't. And the whole Great Nicobar project and what we stand to lose and where it's going and so on. Anyway, but he's worked in Andaman and Nicobar. He set up ANET. So there are places whose values can't be, places and species whose values can't be reduced to something monetary. It's not something that can be built, extracted, or earned from them. You can't just say, okay, that's the value of it. This man has brought so much to so many species and landscapes that he's quite something. And he's 83. Oh, amazing.
Yeah, crazy. And also, even if you stay within what is in the public consciousness, the fact that he built the snake park, the fact that he built the crocodile bank, the work that he does in Agumbe, etc., we see that as tourist spots, right? I mean, I was one of the early people to go to that thing because I was living in Chennai at the time and we went to the family. But the thing that, in context of marginal lands, the thing that I keep circling around is that these are conservation institutions, yes, but they do more than protect the reptiles they're supposed to protect. They become sort of informal universities, and you have proof of concept in that both the snake park and the crocodile bank have actually produced field biologists, they've produced filmmakers, they've produced researchers, they've produced conservationists, all of whom have gone on to add to and even to transform what we knew about its wildlife. So I think that's what in this episode we're talking to Rom about, not just what he built, but we're talking about snakes, we're talking about people, we're talking about knowledge, we're talking about fear, we're talking about conservation, and what we fail to see when we keep walking along the same familiar mental pathways.
Correct. And of course, we'll also be talking about his autobiography. Only the part one is out. I think there's going to be a part two and part three called Snakes, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. I keep getting that title wrong, but Snakes, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. And it's something that I want to ask him about as well because it's quite a book. I mean, when you read it, it's this first part is about his early life, and oh my God, this is I think he would be another national treasure, as I would put it.
Yeah,
So without further ado, shall we jump into the interview?
let's.
Let's
So,
do that.
folks, please welcome Romulus Whitaker. Ron, welcome to the show, and this is probably not the best way to start it because usually these kind of shows, it's like early influences and things like that. But recently, you've been speaking about Nicobar with reference to the Great Nicobar project that is being planned. You've talked about how you've been working in that region since about 1975, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, correct.
Uh, could you broadly talk to us first about the Nicobar as you have experienced it, which then leads to the question of what do you see as the clear and present danger in this project?
Yeah, I could go on for hours because of the history that I've sort of. Okay, I fell in love with the Andaman and Nicobars long before I actually went there, just by reading and looking at maps. I was a map freak, and just saw these islands. They're far away from India, but they belong to India, which is wonderful. Um, and when I first went to the Andamans, I was just going there as a herpetologist. I wanted to find out, I'm sure there are new species of snakes, and sure enough, there were new species of snakes and lizards and stuff there. And literally, very, very little was known about it. There were some early researchers from Europe, from England, who went there and did some collection, but very, very little was known about it. And then more specifically, I went to do crocodile surveys in the mid 70s and found out that crocodiles were so badly hammered that they were on their way out. I didn't make it down to the Nicobars at that time, but I started knowing about it, and colleagues who worked with us at the Andaman and Nicobar Environmental Trust, which we set up in 1989, we're doing a lot of good work down there. We supported their work, both from the anthropological side as well as some of the species that they studied down there, the crab-eating macaque, and one lady did a very interesting study on bats of the Nicobars. But so far there was nothing threatening them because the Nicobars were well away from the Andamans, where most of the development was going on. And we didn't really think that there would be any great threat to the Nicobars. When we saw the deforestation that was going on in the Andamans, and we made quite a bit of noise about it. Indira Gandhi was the prime minister at that time, and then after her death, when Rajiv took over, he went and uh, did some scuba diving and looked around. And again, we were still uh, touting I mean, complaining about the incredible deforestation, which was stopped then, and they no longer exported timber to the mainland. By that time, great sections of the lowland rainforest had already been cleared. So, but at least it had stopped at that stage, which was great. Um, when I did a paper, it became a little booklet called Endangered Andamans in the early 80s. And at that time, the Manan Biosphere Reserve, UNESCO was starting something like that. And they obviously contacted India to try to set aside areas which could be used to be declared biosphere reserves. And they gave the various reasons why and so on. It all made a lot of sense. And I heard about this, and I put in my two bits. I actually said that Great Nicobar would be a fantastic place for it because it is by itself a place which we know very little about. The biodiversity obviously is fabulous, and there is a indigenous tribe there. Well, two tribes, the Nicobarese as well as the Shawmpen, and it just seemed like the ideal place to be protected. So things went on like this, and nothing really much happened down there. Of course, the tsunami came and went, which was an unbelievable experience for the people there. Uh, 7 of our researchers on sea turtles were drowned actually at Galatea Bay at that time. It was quite a huge tragedy. Uh, one of our Karen employees actually floated in the ocean for 14 days and finally made it ashore. It's quite a story. But he survived that and still works for us in the Andamans. So there's a lot of history there as far as we were concerned. Then the specter of this Great Nicobar project, this incredible project, which is now up to the 90,000 crore level. I mean, it's just one of those unbelievable things which could still happen. That the transshipment port, the airport, the tourism development, all this thing one after the other. A lot people who are a lot more knowledgeable have spoken very loudly about this, and I just feel very emotional about it because it seems that the government has done everything wrong. They haven't done their background studies on what will happen to the biodiversity, what will happen to the result of the deforestation of a million trees, the siltation, the runoff into the nearby coral reefs in the ocean. So it just seems so bass-ackwards, if I could put it that way, as a scheme, and they don't seem to know exactly what they want to do. They say that it's very important for India's defense, but in fact, only a tiny percentage of the overall commercial project has anything to do with defense. So the arguments go on and on, back and forth, and there is a lot of argument. I just don't know how it's going to end. I just feel quite bad about it because the history, or say what our government's been doing so far. I just recently read about the Wildlife Board, for example, clears things overnight, clears 100 projects in a couple of hours. This is not the way to run a country if we wanted to survive in terms of our biodiversity and our forests and the people who live in the forest. So I feel very downcast about the whole thing, and I just wish we could do something stronger to protest and to make this stop, make them listen.
Just curious about not just your thoughts on the Nicobar project, but one of the things that struck me is you usually ground your statements in ecology and related environmental issues. This time you actually made a kind of moral argument, an emotional argument, when you said something to the effect of, would we destroy a temple in the name of development? If we won't, then this is equally a temple of the biodiversity, I think you called it.
Yeah.
That kind of seemed intriguing that you chose a moral argument. Were you leaving the environmental arguments to others? Or what is that about?
Well, yeah, it's because I don't know that. I've never considered myself a scientist of any kind. People blame me for being a scientist because I've got a lot of publications, but I don't go deeply into things. I'm sort of a pop scientist, you might want to say. But that's why the moral aspect of it, the emotional aspect of it, is what really hits me because when I first went to the islands and saw what they're doing and in the Andamans itself, I was just devastated, and I spoke out, and I was actually warned during the emergency, Whitaker, you better shut your mouth. You're going to get put in jail. And I sort of got a bit taken aback. I didn't realize how serious my criticisms could be taken. So I did shut up for a year or two while the emergency was going on. and then kept blabbering after that. But yeah, I'm in a way leaving it up to the real scientific environmentalists, the people who really know the coral reefs and who really know the forest biodiversity, to take that stand and to make sense out of it. So in a way, I guess the only thing left was for me to look at the moral ground. I mean, exactly what I said. I just these places are places of worship, as far as I was concerned. I mean, I've never been a religious person, but I've always been a nature person, and as far as I'm concerned, nature is to be worshipped, if anything, and and it's just simply because we're part of it, and you know, despite all the sort of technical advancements we've made and the changes we've put to the poor Earth, we're still part of it, and that realization has to hit home and has to temper the way we do things and determine whether we continue projects like this, which are so destructive and so unknown. That's the we just don't know what we are doing.
Right. Aarti?
I'm just going to plug my favorite and most pertinent in my mind quote from Aldo Leopold here, because it speaks right to what Rom has just been talking about. And in 1949, Aldo Leopold said that civilization has so cluttered the elemental man-earth relationship with gadgets and middlemen that awareness of it is growing dim. We imagine industry is what supports us, forgetting what supports industry.
Mm.
And I think it's even more pertinent today, if anything. And the other
Oh,
thing
yeah.
that I wanted to call attention to, which, oftentimes when we speak out against a project, we are almost always branded as speaking out against the government. And what Rom just said about him speaking out during the time of emergency, that was the current opposition was in power at that time. And unfortunately, in the history of India, I don't think any government is absolved of the kinds of havoc it has created on biodiversity. And today, unfortunately, we are at yet another. But Rom, don't worry, we're going to be having amazing forests in Haryana, no?
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, how crazy can
Sorry.
you get, you guys? I mean, wake up and oh
Oh,
man, drives me
seriously.
nuts. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think we lost Prem. He froze for a bit and then he's gone off, but he'll come back.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so that's just it's horrendous. But thank you for speaking out. I think that's the only thing we can all keep doing. If we shut up, then we've lost it right there. So
Yeah.
thank you for speaking up. And let me just wait for Prem to come back, actually. But Ram, when you spoke about being a map freak. Tell us
Yeah.
more, because I love maps too. I just pore over them. But I wanted to take that conversation in a slightly different direction,
Yeah.
where mapping can be done in many ways. Sometimes it was a colonial exercise. Sometimes, we can reclaim that. And you have worked so closely with the Irulas. I wanted to ask you, what is a map according to them? How do they see the land? How do they map the land? And what have you learned from that? I know we're jumping ahead in our list of questions, but just this
Yeah.
is the one that I'm interested in, so I'm plugging it in here before while Prem takes time to come back.
Sure. You know what? Perfect. What comes to mind immediately when you ask a question like that is that I walked a lot with the Irulas over the years. I mean, I've been with them for 50 years now, and they've taught me so much. And one of the early experiences I had was walking with them and walking back to the village where they lived. And the village was really not a village in the real sense. It was a cluster of huts because they were not allowed to live in the village. I mean, um, I don't have to go into all the details of the reasons why, but for an Indian audience anyway. But they were separate, away from the village. But what was most interesting to me is that there were dozens of paths leading to this hut cluster of huts. Not one path, not one main road. And I would ask Nadesan, how come people are walking from this side? He says, well, if you're walking on the same path, what are you going to see? And I clicked, of course. He's saying, I mean, he's a snake man. He's a man who collects things. He's a hunter, a gatherer. And if you walk on the same bloody path, you're not going to see new stuff at all. So you go on a new path. And so there are dozens of paths leading to the village, to their settlement. And this was just so interesting, in a way mind-blowing to me, that yeah, and when we walk with them, they're looking and picking up stuff and picking up a piece of leaf and crushing it in front of me and making me smell it and say, this is used for such and such. And that's why you can tell by the smell or the feel of the leaf. So all these things which they kept teaching me on the way. And interestingly, it took a long time for even this to happen because they're very quiet people and it's very hard to elicit answers to your questions from them. It's not as though they want to hide anything. It's just they don't have
Right.
that vociferousness to keep talking about all sorts of things that they know about. And I know this, I know that. So getting stuff out of them is quite difficult sometimes. So, but it's just been so wonderful an experience. I mean, even now, whenever I'm with them, I'm learning something new. It's too bad I wasn't 5 years old when I first went out with them. I'd barely be one of those hotshot herpetologists, but they keep telling me, I mean, disparagingly, you mean you didn't see that? My son, he's just 10 years old, he would have seen that, you know. So we reached a friendly stage at which they are able to criticize my sort of inability to see things that they see, that's wonderful. I mean, that's
Give
yeah.
us an example of what it might be that the Irulas saw that you just completely missed.
Uh, well, one particular example is a pretty good one because it's related in a way to me. We were in Mangalore, Chokalingam and I. Chokalingam was one of the real top honchos of the Irula community. I would call him a chief, except they don't have chiefs. But he was very highly respected, both for his medicinal abilities as well as his snake catching. And we were in Mangalore for something. I can't remember. I think there was a snake show there or something. So we went to put in, yeah, to show some snakes or whatever. But early in the morning, when we walked out from where we were staying, we passed a vacant lot and we were like I was always watching what he was watching because I wanted to try to see something before he saw it. And then he says, "Ado pambo," and he said, "A snake is over there." And I looked and I looked and I couldn't see a damn thing. So he walked over and picked up this snake from the ground. It was a sand boa, a regular sand boa. I thought it was a regular sand boa. And he said, "Anal vera madri irka." He said, it's different. It's not like the sand boa we get back in Madras. And I said, "Yeah, you're right. It's much smoother. It doesn't have that, rough skin that ours does. And it looks different. The tail is very blunt. And it looks more like the red sand boa." And he said, "Nilila, that's not the red sand boa. It's not the mun pambu." So we took it back. And I mean, the amazing thing was that he saw it so far away across the field. And I had, of course, no clue. And he just shook his head and looked at me. And I know what he was thinking, this Laddu. I mean, we've been together for years and he still can't see. So we took it back. And over the years, I kept thinking about this snake looking so different and whether it was a new species or not. And one of the scientific officers that we had at the Croc Bank, Indranil Das, looked at it more carefully and did the scalation counts and everything and found out it was a new species. And he says uh, he named it after Rom Whitaker. He says we'll call it Whitaker's boa. So I said, wow, I mean, what a wonderful coincidence that I was with Chokalingam when we found it. And yeah, so yeah, I mean, I wasn't terribly old at that time, so I had already had a snake named after me, even though I wasn't an old man yet. Ah,
Mm. And the Irulas, welcome back, Prem, by the way. We lost you for a bit.
Yep.
Was that your power going out as always?
The usual jinx that whenever the
Always.
recording is.
so
You know,
no
Rom,
potholes, but power loss.
Yeah,
That's
it never happens except on the days when I'm doing it. Like, I swear it's
regularly, it's when we go online, when we start recording, his power will go.
okay. Okay.
Anyway, so Prem, just to fill you in, we were talking about the Irulas, and I
yeah,
asked him about map making with the Irulas because theirs is probably a very different way of looking at the land. So,
right.
what do the Irulas feel about how life is changing around them, how the landscape is changing around them, Rom?
I mean, now it's totally different, obviously. For one thing, when I first met the Irulas, very, very few of the kids ever went to school.
Mm,
There was no scope for that. I won't go into the details, but there was just no scope. And as far as they were concerned, they wanted to teach their kids what they knew.
Mhm.
And in those days, living a tribal life, so to speak, was still possible. The the laws, the wildlife laws, and so on were starting to come in, and so this would not able them to continue doing what they used to do, catching snakes for the skins and all that kind of stuff. But at that time, they wanted their kids to learn this. They didn't see any value in kids learning anything in school. Today, I don't know what the percentage is, but 80–90% of the kids do go to school and they don't very often complete school, but they get up to the eighth or 10th standard and get into other jobs. And very many of them do not want to do what their fathers and mothers did. They want to join the mainstream, which is difficult for them because, for one thing, they are easily identifiable by their height, their skin color, their lack of sophistication, so to speak. And yeah, I feel very sorry for that. I mean, this is one of those things that's happening in India. The assimilation of people who were marginalized before is just so needed and so necessary. And there are wonderful social type groups which are working to help them get through this and get past the discrimination that they've always had. But their old knowledge, the tribal knowledge of finding things, the medicinal plants and all, is disappearing so fast that it's a real tragedy. And yeah, I mean, maybe I've got too many glorified ideas about how this could be hung on to, but we it's something that shouldn't disappear, and we should learn from them. And we have learned so much from them. I mean, all the herpetologists, for example, still depend on very often depend on Irulas going with them to find what snakes or what lizards they need to find to describe new species and so on. But yeah, things have changed so drastically. Um,
What
yeah.
happens to the kids? Do they get jobs? What kinds of jobs do they get? Or is it just, daily wage work?
It's daily wage work. Interestingly, they would work in rice mills. They would work they're learning trades like tile setting, uh, construction work. Um, Whereas in the previous years, as soon as the snakeskin industry was closed down and they had no longer had any way of making money by catching snakes, their jobs were ditch digging. This is before the time of JCBs digging trenches along the road. So there was a lot of work. It was very tough work, road
Mm,
work.
mm.
And that sort of crippled me up too, because to see guys with all this knowledge doing something so basic. I mean, just having to break rocks or dig holes. Yeah, it was pretty miserable. So they are,
Yeah.
yeah, the youngsters are getting jobs now, and some of them are going to college, and some of them are, getting along quite well. But the minority, the great minority.
Mm, mm. Um, One last question from me on this, and then I'll turn it over to Prem again. What do you, in your mind, feel we lose when this kind of knowledge goes away? Because scientists, of course, have their fount of knowledge too, but maybe these guys fill in certain ways that a scientist trained in the Western methods of science probably does not know or can replicate. What are we losing in terms of traditional landscape knowledge, landscape memory, when something like this goes away?
One
And
sec.
what is the danger then of if we lose it? Maybe that's a more
Sorry.
important question. Should I repeat?
I'm sorry, I've got a problem here.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I'm very sorry.
No worries. No, I was just saying that when we lose memory, when we lose knowledge, like what you were talking about, like the Irulas and the next generation,
Yeah.
there were different set of skills or whatever it may be. What do we stand to lose that Western science cannot fill in, and what is the implication of the loss of such knowledge?
Um, for one thing, a lot of their skills and a lot of their knowledge has already been assimilated by the scientists
Mm.
without necessarily acknowledging them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll just take one very classic example are the medicinal plants. And
Mm-hmm.
this is not just limited to the Irulas. There are tribal people around the country who have given us not acknowledged or not, not acknowledged at all. They have given us the knowledge of these medicinal plants, which are now cultivated and turned into life-saving drugs around the world. So that is probably the most obvious thing that we have lost, that they have lost, and
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of maybe too late now to give them the credit because we started something called the Irula Women's Society in 1986, my ex-wife Zaya and I, and it was basically to do this, to start growing medicinal plants, and it's still going on. They're still doing it, but in typical fashion, either the government or private agencies have taken it over, and they buy the plants in bulk and do the fractionation and turn it into drugs. The tribal people are never acknowledged, and their knowledge, of course, is disappearing. It's
Mm.
disappearing or has been amalgamated into what we call modern science or modern allopathic medicines. But it started out with them.
Mm. Prem?
Yeah, yeah, this whole thing about the Irulas is fascinating. You also started the Irula cooperative. I don't know if you spoke about it while,
No.
yeah. I was curious though, that particular thing, and that is just to continue the Irula conversation for just one beat longer. Uh, would you say that this cooperative has managed to genuinely transfer power and ownership, or is it merely redirecting the labor?
The Irula Cooperative, for the one thing that it did do, is provide the vast amount of venom for the production of antivenom over the years. This is its 48th year or something in existence, and the fact that it has gone on and won top awards, central government awards, and local awards, and so on for being one of the best cooperatives going. Uh, I think on the side of it, it's probably not known by most people that this means that they have literally saved tens of thousands of human lives from snakebite. And this kind of thing is not usually uh, touted as being, one of the main achievements of it. And certainly the Irulas, as far as they're concerned, yeah, we caught the snakes, yeah, we extracted the venom, and we sold the venom. and that's about the limit to it. So they really deserve the credit, though. Interestingly, the Irla cooperative may not survive too much longer, because the WHO has mandated that captive snakes should be used for venom extraction so that it's traceable, that wild snakes should no longer be taken from the wild. And there is a good argument there too, because when you take snakes from the wild, and even though you're only keeping them for 3 or 4 weeks and they're not under any harm that venom is extracted 3 or 4 times, the snakes are released back to the wild in a different place. And translocating any wild animal is not a good thing for that animal. So although a study hasn't been done here, studies elsewhere in the world have shown that translocating snakes to other places very often leads to their death. So it could be that this is happening here as well. And the Irulas are hunters. They are not husbandry people. They're not farmers. And that's why I say that it could be coming to an end in the coming years. That, yeah.
Is that a function of these wildlife laws that have started proliferating, that people with extraordinary ecological knowledge, which you spoke about just now, such people are being turned into criminals?
Well, it was interesting that you say that, because when we first started the Irla Cooperative in 1978 is when we formulated the whole plan. The Forest Department was dead against it. These guys are poachers. These guys are hunting animals which are protected. We will not give them permission. So the 4 years that it took from 78 to 82 was, man, an endless bunch of trips to the secretariat and to the various offices, the government offices, drinking thousands of cups of tea with the various section officers and secretaries, and arguing that this is really needed and these are the most skillful people to do this. So yeah, even today. Well, today, of course, the laws are so strict that they're not allowed to do any snake hunting outside of what they're permitted to catch 10,000 snakes for the Irla Cooperative to produce venom. So yeah, they're not under any pressure as far as the authorities are concerned.
I wanted to take you back in time a little bit more away from the subject. And the question is, you began actually as a hunter and a collector. I mean, hence the taxidermy and all of that. When did wanting to possess animals become a desire to protect them?
I went through I went through various phases. Um, I was definitely a hunter. I mean, as a kid, I was a fisherman and a hunter, and I had no qualms about it. And as far as I have certain sort of rules and regulations. If I'm going to kill an animal, I should eat it. It should be for some particular purpose. It wasn't just going out and blasting and anything that I saw. Uh, I think what really hit me was in the early 70s. I was given an early grant by the then World Wildlife Fund India, which was just coming up, started by Zafar Fateh Ali and other people in Bombay. And I was given a small grant to do a survey of crocodiles, which they had heard, the Bombay Natural History Society had heard, are getting hammered and are, in very bad shape. So my survey was in mostly the North Indian rivers to look for the gharial, and we couldn't find any. And man, this was a shockaroo, because the gharial is just such a enigmatic, such a fantastic creature, and it's going extinct. I mean, how can this
So
happen?
what was causing the hammering?
Well, the British, of course, back in the day, and the Maharajas, and you can go way back to the Mughals and everybody else. They killed crocodiles because they're dangerous and they're ugly, and they're vermin, as the British put all the predators on that vermin list. So kill them. And then, of course, the skin industry came in the early 1900s, and local people, the local tribal people and all, relished the eggs. And the crocodile eggs are very easy to find. You can very easily see the tracks of a croc. So there were lots of pressures. Then the rivers started getting screwed up, polluted and dammed and diverted and everything else. So there was one thing after the other led to extirpation, particularly the gharial, because it is dependent on clean rivers, clean running water with lots of fish, which is direct competition to humans. So the gharial was down to, we estimated less than 200 adults in the early 70s, and something had to be done. So I think that was probably in answer to Prem's question, the time when I realized, yeah, man, I mean, I'm doing something as a herpetologist, but it looks like I have to do some conservation too. I had hardly even, the word was hardly even in my my reckoning at that stage. Conservation, wow. Okay, so we've got to do something about it. And yeah, we did. We made a lot of noise.
Right. Uh, that last part of that answer actually brings me to what you're most often associated with in the public imagination, the snake park. When you started that, uh, were you thinking of yourself as a conservationist, even if that word was not part of your working vocabulary at the time? Or were you thinking of yourself as an educator? Or was it simply a man trying to build a life around snakes?
I think it sort of started when I was in America working at the Miami Serpentarium, which is a whole other thing. But I realized that people were coming to see snakes with a very negative attitude, but when they saw the snakes, their interest was stimulated, and you could see the interest opening up, particularly kids, of course.
Mhm.
They are fascinated by snakes. And this sort of led me to the idea, well, and actually much earlier than that, when I was a little kid and already interested in snakes, I think I was 5 or 6 years old, and I became the real obnoxious little kid telling adults, the snakes are nice. They're not wet, they're not slimy, they feel nice, and adults would just shake their heads and say, wow, this kid is totally weird. But in a way that gave me some credit as well. It makes if I'm a weirdo, I'm something. So, and this sort of kept growing as I grew older. And I guess I became the proselytizer, the sort of snake missionary, so to speak, which is a weird word for me to use considering my experiences with religion. But yeah, I think I just took that on very, very early on.
Yeah, I remember, I mean, back in the day when the snake park opened, there was enormous interest. I think somewhere I remember reading almost 1 million people came in that first year. I was one of them. I don't know, a million, but yeah. And you mentioned that people come with a sort of fear and then it turns into fascination. I think one of the recurring points that you've made over a lifetime is that fear is inculcated early, but so is interest or fascination or uh, all of that, right? And that
Yeah,
stems from that incident with your mother,
yeah,
who photographed you with a snake instead of
yeah,
knocking it on the head.
yeah,
I love that story. I
Yeah.
really do.
yeah. Yeah, I
Take
was
us
just
back
four
to your
years
mom.
old. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, she was so wonderful. Everything that I did in life was a result of her encouragement. I mean, the average mother, when a kid brings a snake home, if he dares to, would be, "Well, get that thing out of here." I mean, that would be the first reaction. And here's a mother who said, wow, it's gorgeous. And, that word sort of stuck in my head. I'm sure that's what she said, but try to think. I mean, that was like, what, 80 years ago when I was
Mhm.
4 years old. So I couldn't possibly remember. But the photograph says it. And,
Yeah.
she took the photograph. She was already I mean, she was very much into photography, which was wonderful. And yeah, right from the start, she was the influence on what I became and what I did because of her encouragement. I mean, she let this kid wander around luckily we lived in northern New York State in a place where there were no venomous snakes, and she knew that. Although there are places not far from where we live where there are rattlesnakes, but not where we live. So whatever I brought home, I was okay with. I was always getting stung by bees and wasps and stuff like that, which, every kid has to go through that. Well, not every kid, but this one did for sure. But I always thought that kids are down low on the ground anyway, and they're seeing all these creatures crawling, and the average mother and average father or adult is going to slap that thing away from them and don't touch it, it's going to bite it, it's going to sting or something like that. But this is the fascination. It's much better than toys because they're living creatures and they're little beetles with all sorts of shapes and colors, butterflies flying around you. Man, I mean, it's how exciting. And all you need is an adult, preferably a mother or father, to encourage that. And luckily, there are, some of us got that encouragement and stuck with it. Yeah.
The snake bug actually worked as a kind of, what would you call it? A kind of informal university of herpetology in India. I was wondering, i- did you see people literally change as they visited this thing?
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Could you talk about that a bit?
Well, I could talk about the several people. Okay, overall, I would say dozens of people passed through the snake park and more recently through the Croc Bank and have become some of India's top wildlife people, which is, I mean, to me, that's just a wonderful legacy that I perhaps helped create. There are two or three individuals who are who really stood out at the snake park. One of them was Vijaya. Jay Vijaya was a young girl who just came to the snake park. She was doing her studies, but she was very fascinated by animals. And she became, we sort of put people into particular slots at the snake park, and she liked turtles a lot, which is perfect because we needed someone to do turtles. So she ended up doing turtle surveys throughout the country. She rediscovered a species of turtle in Kerala called the cane turtle, which had been missing for 100 years. And wonderfully, it was recently redescribed as Vijaya Kelly's. So it's actually named after her, which is what a wonderful legacy. She had a very tragic death when she was quite young and still in her 20s. But the stuff that she did, the number of papers she wrote, I mean, she was not a trained scientist, but in a way, that's kind of, the kind of person I would encourage because they're very much like me. Just pure interest and ability to learn how to write a scientific paper. Okay, the second person was a guy called Dhruvajyoti Basu, who was at the Indian Institute of Technology in Madras. And he was he was a joker for sure, and he was very artistic. And we needed someone at the snake park. These are people who visited the snake park because IIT was right next to the snake park, so they would come over, and they would obviously be not very happy with doing their studies, and they come over and hang out with us. And it was probably a lot more fun than doing classroom work, which I encourage like mad because I'm the same way. I hated school. So Basu started out as our staff artist and made some posters about Save Gindi Park and whatever was the present, the current sort of thing that we were trying to do, trying to publicize. He would do, but then he got very interested in this animal, the gharial, and I'm not sure if I said this to him, but I said, man, you get deep into this, and you can become India's Mr. Gharial. How about that? And he sort of, I think he sort of liked that idea. So he started doing surveys up on the rivers in North India and found out where the last gharial were nesting. Around this time in the mid-70s, the government of India had already started Project Tiger, and then on the tail of that started Project Crocodile, which I was amazed at. And again, it was very likely due to some of the agitation which we had been making through the Bombay Natural History Society and World Wildlife Fund, and the findings that I made on the gharial numbers down to almost nothing definitely contributed to this. But to have a guy like that from the snake park doing these surveys, publishing both in the newspaper as well as in scientific papers what the status of gharial was extremely helpful. Okay, the third person was Satish Bhaskar. He was another IIT guy, and his thing was early in the morning he'd jog down to Elliott Beach and dive into the ocean and swim for an hour or two, and then come back and do a bit of classwork, and then come to the snake park. And I was wondering how I knew his parents didn't know what he was doing. They obviously were paying for his engineering education and hoped that he would become an engineer. Forget it. He loved the sea, and he became Mr. Sea Turtle. We started doing sea turtle walks back in the early 70s along the coast, the Madras coast, and we found people were collecting the eggs. Almost every female sea turtle who came ashore laid her eggs, and then the people would collect them and sell them in the market. We had to do something about that. So we set up a hatchery at Cholamanda. Some of our artist friends there and the Deluge family set up a hatchery in their backyard. So we started hatching sea turtle eggs and releasing them. And Satish got really deeply into this. And so he said, look, we're doing this little bit of work here, but I'd like to start doing surveys around the country. Satish ended up walking at least half of the coastline, the entire coastline of India. I mean, thousands of kilometers by foot. And then he started going to the islands, both to the Andaman and Nicobars as well as to Lakshadweep, and started doing surveys there and publishing the latest data on where the nesting beaches were for sea turtles. So this guy alone did so much for sea turtle conservation. He set the standard. He set the ball rolling really for the whole thing. So yeah, you're right. People really changed. And it was kind of a similar change that I went through too. I mean, from my scholastic days, I tried to go to college in America. I lasted a whole year, but my attitude was, man, this is just like high school. I already did 12 years of that shit. I want to, cool it. I want to do something interesting in life, not be an academic. So yeah.
I think,
I
for me,
want, I am going to jump ahead again, but I want Rom to hold up his right index finger, please.
Oh, this one, the bent one.
Yes. Is that the
It's
one?
not, yeah,
Is
it's not
that the
too bad.
fabled one?
It's not too bad. It's just that it's my trigger finger,
I
and as you'll
know.
notice, it doesn't pull the trigger.
Quite trigger. Yes.
So I was absolved from going for Vietnam. Hey, man.
I know. But let's take you back to that point where on that dark highway you got blinded by the car lights and you did something which you wouldn't ever do or tell anybody to do. Please take us to that story and how it
Yeah.
happened.
Okay. I was in Texas, El Paso, Texas, at the William Beaumont Hospital. I was a lab technician there. Instead of going to Vietnam, I went to Japan to start blood banking, to supply blood to the front lines in Vietnam. This was in 1965, I guess. So the war was just ramping up. But luckily, I was ensconced in Texas, which was heaven. I mean, it was rattlesnake heaven for
I
one thing.
know. And there are some
And
fascinating stories in your book. Guys, I'm going to stop right here just to plug Snakes, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. That is the first of 3 parts of Rom's autobiography. And it's just, I don't know. I think I'm so slowly going through it because I'm savoring every little bit that I wanted to finish it before today, but it hasn't happened
uh,
yet. But
that's
guys, great
great.
book to pick up. But there's this story which just completely caught my fancy. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I was collecting snakes for the Staten Island Zoo in New York, and I had visited the Staten Island Zoo, and there was a very well-known herpetologist, a director there, um, and he gave me orders for the various snakes that he wanted, and he wanted a prairie rattlesnake. So yeah, so I went out and I drive out at night on the highways, and very often, especially if it was a cool day, evening. I mean, it was in the wintertime. It was quite cool, but in the evening, the road would still be warm, so these rattlesnakes would come out and bask on the road. So I'd drive out one night. Very often I had a friend with me, but this night I drove out alone and saw a very nice prairie rattlesnake just gliding off the road. And so I pulled over and stopped and went over. And in those days, we pinned rattlesnakes. You press on its head and grab the neck and put it in a bag. These days, we use different techniques, which I won't go into, but much gentler techniques than what we used in those days. So the rattlesnake was disappearing into the bushes, so I pulled the tail out and pinned it. But I didn't have my snake hook with me, so I pinned it with my flashlight. And talk about stupidity. I couldn't see what I was doing properly. And as I pinned it, I felt this jab in my finger, and I realized, oh my God, this snake has nailed me. So I just cursed myself for being so stupid. And this was my second snake bite. I won't go into the first one. That was crazy as well. But this was a little more serious because it was a rattlesnake. And it was, yeah, it really hurt. And it felt like a hot iron going into my hand. I mean, it was really painful. So I
Is
realized,
it a
okay, this is,
neurotoxin? What kind of a toxin is
no,
a
it's a
rattlesnake?
hemotoxin primarily.
Hemotoxin.
It
Okay.
affects the blood
Mm.
and the muscle and the tissue. So yeah, it causes pain, a lot of pain. So I bagged it somehow, got back into the car, drove back with my arm swelling and swelling and swelling and swelling. And I thought, go to the hospital. I was working at the hospital, so I knew where to go. But, well, is it really that necessary? And so I stopped at a coffee shop just outside the hospital
Uh-huh.
gate. And the lady working in there looked at my arm. She said, "Are you nuts? You got bitten by a snake, man. Get into the hospital." She was saying, I mean, I guess I must have told her, because how would she know otherwise? But the hand was looking pretty bad. So I got into the hospital and they put a tourniquet on my arm, a pressure cuff, which I objected to because I didn't believe in using tourniquets. And sure enough, these days you're not supposed to use tourniquets
That's
for a
right.
snake bite. So I just released the pressure on the pressure cuff. They gave me 5 ampules of antivenom. I went into an allergic reaction from the antivenom, and from then on, for the next 10 days, things went downhill because they, okay, in the army, well, medicine in general is experimental. Okay, I don't want to scare everybody out there, but the point is doctors know a lot, but they have a lot to learn. And in the case, if you're in the army, you're a guinea pig for sure. So they put my arm in ice. They said this is called cryotherapy, and this is going to occlude the venom in your arm so it doesn't create any systemic symptoms. They gave me this whole rap, and I was sort of, well, I think they'd given me Demerol by that time for the pain, so I was not in any great stage to argue back. Anyway, I was in the army. You don't argue with the chief, the doctors or anything like that. So they kept my arm in ice for 72 hours, and my arm became a frozen steak sort of thing. I could donk, donk. I was wondering if it would snap off. But the pain of going into the freeze and coming out of the freeze was unbelievable. Demerol was pretty cool, though. They gave me enough that I sort of floated about an inch above the bed and sort of laid there,
Oh.
sort of looking at the nurses saying, "Hi, are you an angel?" and stuff like that. So, yeah, I survived that. But what a good lesson. I mean, anyone who's ever been bitten by a snake probably says the same thing. Never again. I mean, it's just such a ridiculous thing to happen. And, you can't pretend that you're a hero that you got bitten by a snake. You can only say that you're an idiot and a clumsy idiot at that. So that was a very, very
So how
strong.
many times have you been a clumsy idiot? Let's hear the number.
Well, I managed to get bitten again after that, and that was another interesting experience because I went blind for some time as a result. And
Ooh.
that
Which
was
was,
from
what snake was that?
that was called a green rock rattlesnake. This was very interesting because no one had ever recorded a bite from a green rock rattlesnake.
Well,
And no, it was my first scientific note I wrote for the New York Herpetological Society. I wrote a one-page note about getting bitten by this green rock rattler and all the symptoms. What was nice about it is I was in the hospital. I mean, I went back to the hospital and they did all the blood tests and all that. So I had all this data. So scientific. I became a scientist overnight. But yeah, the result was another messed up thumb. Um, yeah, but since then I've been very lucky. I mean, not lucky. I've been very careful and handled a lot of snakes, caught a lot of king cobras, but been very, very careful with them. And yes, I'm still here.
Yeah. So you have the dubious distinction of being allergic both to venom and antivenom.
Hmm. That's not unusual for
Is
people who
it?
work with snakes. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. For one thing, people who work with venom, uh, unless they're very carefully wearing a mask all the time, especially dry venom, they inhale it. And venom gets into very often when you're bagging a snake, they bite the bag and the venom is in the bag. And if you don't wash the bag out, it's dried. So the dust, when you're shaking it out or something, and you breathe in some of the dust, you
Oh.
can very easily get allergic to either cobra venom or pit viper venom. In this case, I was allergic to pit viper venom. Later on, I became allergic to cobra venom as well. The antivenom allergies are very interesting because almost 30% of human beings are allergic to horse serum, which
Mm.
is what
Right.
all antivenom is made from.
Mm.
So that doesn't mean they're hyper allergic, that they'll get an anaphylaxis or something like, very, very bad allergy. But it means that they have the propensity to get an allergic reaction. So it's not too unusual, especially people who work with snakes, to have this
Mm.
allergy. Yeah.
Interesting.
India has this big four antivenom model.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's still scientifically defensible because you've been talking about advances in the field?
Sorry, I missed that.
The big four antivenom model,
Yeah.
considering all the advances in the field of herpetology, is that still scientifically defensible, the model that we have?
Not at all. There's a lab in Bangalore run by Dr. Kartik Sunagar called the Evolutionary Venomics Lab.
Mhm.
And there are other labs both in Tezpur as well as University of Mysore where people have also done tests on the antivenom for the big four with the species of snakes found in their area.
Yeah.
Just to make this a complete story, let's go back to the Irula Cooperative. They're collecting snakes from one district in Tamil Nadu. Whereas if you're bitten by a snake in Rajasthan or in West Bengal, far, far away from these snakes, it's very likely that the venom of those snakes there, even though it's the same species, is quite different from the venom of the snakes found in the district in Tamil Nadu. Therefore, the antivenom may or may not be effective.
Mm.
So the studies that are going on and what they're trying to do is to come up with regionally appropriate antivenoms. In
Okay.
other words, getting snakes from a particular region. My colleague who lives right next door, Jerry Martin, has got a small serpentarium where he's producing venom from the local species here near Mysore. And these venoms are going to antivenom producers who will ultimately produce a regional antivenom for this area. So yes, it's not only regional variation in the same species, but when you say crate, for example, there are 9 species of crates in India. It's not just the common crate, which is being used to make antivenom. We really have to make antivenom from all these crates, or at least most of them. There are 4 species of cobras in India, and the antivenom is only made from the spectacle cobra. What about the monocelate cobra? What about the cobra in the Andamans, for example? These are totally different, and their venoms are totally different. Yeah.
And the polyvalent venom, is that still a viable option, or do we need specific
That's a
antivenoms?
very good point. That the specific ones are called monovalent as compared to this four species, which is called polyvalent. The difficulty is when a patient comes to a hospital with a snake bite,
Oh, that's right. You don't know which
which
snake.
snake bit
Ah,
me? And if
yes.
he has a cell phone and he got a photograph of it and shows it to the doctor knows. Great. Polyvalent is the way to go, is in my estimation of it. I think that's really the way to go. But uh, there are drawbacks. Like I said, there's these other species which have to be included. In Africa, they have a similar problem. They've got, in some parts of Africa, some countries, they have a huge variety of species of snakes. So they make polyvalent antivenom for a dozen species, which there's an argument against that too, because that means the amount of antibodies in each for each species may not be sufficient. So you'd have to give larger
Mm,
quantities. So
mm.
monovalent would be just great if you could figure out
Which snake bit
which
you?
snake bit you. So there's something, there are tests, so-called ELISA tests, which can be used to find out what snake did bite you. However, number one, it's expensive. Number two, it takes time.
I
And time
thought so,
is,
right? 72 hours? Well, how long does an ELISA take?
well, you've got to figure out fast, within an hour or two, what
Yeah,
snake
yeah,
bit you.
yeah.
So there, people are continually coming up with new detection kits, what they call venom detection kits. And yeah, and there are false negatives and false positives, and there will be false positives even from non-venomous snakes. So
Mm,
someone's bitten by a rat snake or a python, and it might come out positive. So things still have to be worked out. But I think making a polyvalent serum pan-India is probably the answer. And this is just
mm.
me speaking. There are a lot of people who are listening out there who would say, no, 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 the regional antivenom is the way to go. But even if you make a regional antivenom, okay, a doctor here, what's the region?
Mm,
And a doctor here has to know whether his antivenom is going to be effective. And what about a few hundred kilometers away
yeah,
from here?
yeah. I mean,
What
yeah,
if,
where does it stop and where does it
yeah,
change?
exactly. So I think polyvalent probably will end up with a really good pan-India polyvalent antivenom. This is what I feel will happen.
And who's working on this, Rom?
A lot of people, both the antivenom producers themselves, there are five major antivenom producers in the country, and the Evolutionary Economics Lab in Bangalore, which I just told you about at the Indian Institute of Science. The University of Mysore has been doing studies. Tezpur University has been doing studies. So there are people who are doing studies on this, and it's just that it's taking time. And
Mm,
50,000 men, women, and children are killed every year by snakes in
every year.
India.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
we don't have the time.
What about access? Because I have a small place in just north of Shirsi in the
Mm,
Western Ghats,
yeah.
and my caretaker there has stepped on a Malabar pit viper, got
Mm,
bitten,
yeah.
and had to be taken to the hospital. But that place is so remote, it is hard to get to, whatever place has the closest
Yeah.
anti-venom. What is
True.
access looking like in India for, especially in rural and far-flung places? Assam and
Well,
stuff like that, you have rivers. You need to find a
yeah, yeah.
boat to go, and then,
No, exactly. No, I was just going to say 108 free ambulance service is great where there are roads, but what
right,
happens when there are no roads?
right.
No, you're very right. So the Madras Crocodile Bank has been doing a snake bite mitigation project for years now, and we're basically doing it for prevention of snake bite
Mm, mm,
because once you're bitten, you've got to get to the hospital fast, and it may not be possible. So prevention is really the answer to this.
right.
So, uh, and access to antivenom, it's not only the access, it's the knowledge of people about antivenom because they would more likely depend on a local healer, a local
Mm,
a local
mm,
guy who either does a religious sort of healing or a herbal doctor who will do so-called healing. And the ironic thing is that very often they're successful simply because most snake bites are not fatal.
Mm.
But when you got 1 million snake bites, there's going to be a lot of fatalities anyway. So we just keep saying, look, snake bite is a medical emergency. It's just like a car accident. It's just like a heart attack. You've got to get to the hospital and get antivenom. So that word antivenom, antivenom, antivenom is just so important to get across to people.
God, yeah. Again, we've lost Prem, so I'm going
Yeah,
to continue. I'm going to plug on.
sure.
Um, so let's move to the king.
Mm,
I visited ARRS in 2010,
mm.
and it was, I think, it was not very long. It was 3 days, but I think that was, oh my God, I can still feel that humidity and that, the place,
What what
the
what month were you
wetness.
what month were you there?
September,
Okay.
September.
Still
And
yeah.
yeah, and it was still wet. It was raining all the time, and we walked through the stream, and I think we walked in the stream. And this was when Chetna and Neeti and all of them were at
Oh,
ARRS. And I
very
mean,
cool.
I just had 3 days of amazing education.
Wonderful.
Take us back to why you started ARRS and the king serpent.
Well, if anyone out there who likes snakes, if you could possibly like a snake, the king cobra is the ultimate, the super snake, and it is just so glorious. I mean, it's got that regal name, sure, but yeah, it has a presence which is just so different from any other snake. And what I love about king cobras is the word that I often use is their innocence. And people look at me as though I'm sort of crackers or something. Innocent? How can a snake be innocent? Well, it is, and it's smart enough to know that human beings are very dangerous, so it keeps away from us. And hardly anyone ever gets bitten by a king cobra. So, despite the fact that people are scared like hell of this huge venomous snake, it doesn't bite anybody because it keeps away from people. And it's diurnal, for one thing. It doesn't hang around at night to get stepped on. It's big, so it's obvious you can't. If you do see it, you can turn around and run away. Yeah, so in 1970, in the early 70s, I was doing a lot of trips to the Western Ghats. And of course, my goal was to find a king cobra. Yeah. And at that time, I met a very interesting fellow named Kenneth Anderson, whom I know you know about. He was the sort of, some people say he's South India's Jim Corbett, but in a way he was, but in a way he was just such, so, his exaggeration and he would bring 30 stories and put them into one story to make them exciting. And there was exciting. His Nine Managers on a Rogue, his books. So yeah, he was a great old guy. And he said to me, he liked snakes too. And I said, I'm really looking for a king cobra. I've been in the Western Ghats so many times. I haven't seen one yet. I found a shedded skin, and he said, there's a place called Agumbe, and he writes about it in one of his stories about his first face-to-face encounter with a king cobra. It was nothing dramatic, but he was just so impressed. So I got on a bus and I went to Agumbe, and yeah, my first, it was a funny little town. I mean, very, very tiny town at that time. And I got there and I was with a couple of friends, my girlfriend at the time and a young guy. And I guess we were all hippies, looking stranger than even I look now. And but the people were very friendly and they told me there's a road which goes into the forest where there's a forest working camp and you could go inside there. So I walked into the forest and I left my friends behind. I said, I'll just go and scout out a place where we can camp. And I had a knapsack on my back with a sleeping bag in it. And I walked for 2 or 3 kilometers into the forest, and I was just wow, and all these trees
Oh
dripping
man, that
with.
forest. Yeah.
It's just so beautiful. I was just fascinated. And then, as I was walking along the trail, I saw this black tail of a snake disappearing into the bushes, and I thought, well, there the rat snakes grow very big, and they're very dark
Huge.
in color. They're black. So I said, wow, big rat snake. And being Mr. Snake Man, of course, I dove on it, football type of tackle and grabbed it by the tail. But then what happened next was pretty scary because this hooded snake sort of rising up
Ooh.
above me, looking down, puny mortal sort of thing. So I said, oh shit, I found my first king cobra, but I let it go. But then I cursed myself. How can I let it go? Well, it's saving my life, of course, obviously. So and I saw it pushing off and disappearing into the bushes, grabbed a stick which was lying there and grabbed it by the tail again. And over the next 10 or 15 minutes, I parried it as it charged me and open mouth. And yeah, my heart was probably racing at about 160. The adrenaline was flowing. I was just so excited and so pleased that I had found a king cobra. Okay, now how to bag it? Well, I had an ordinary little snake bag which I'd put small snakes into, but I had my sleeping bag, but it's in my knapsack on my back. Okay, so by hook or by crook, by somehow holding the snake's tail, holding it back, pulling the sleeping bag out, stretching it out,
Gosh.
and then propping it open so that it made a nice little cave-like place for the snake to go into, turning the snake around from it wanted to push off, obviously, but I turned it around and aimed it toward the sleeping bag, and it saw this cave and just slipped right in. I
What's
grabbed
with
it.
these snakes? Why do they just slip into those holes? Like
Yeah,
every bag that's
it's
open, they just go
it's
in.
so perfect. And we use the pipe and bag method now.
Hmm.
Ajay Giri, who's the field director at ARS, is the most magical snake rescuer in the world because he's just so calm. People who come to film him say, "Where's the drama? I mean, come on, do something. Say it. Ooh, He doesn't. Just calmly gets it. The snake sees the pipe with the bag attached to it and
Hmm.
slips straight inside.
Amazing.
No, it's basically security, finding a
Mm.
dark hole to go into.
Ah, right.
So it works like a
Mm.
Okay.
charm.
You talked about the king cobra as being spectacular. Oh, by the way, sorry, I disappeared again. That's the second. Normally there are two of these. Uh, you talked about the king cobra as being spectacular. I remember reading that the king cobra is also valuable as a sort of doorway into rainforest conservation. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just found an article that I had written way back when, which was titled "The Real King of the Jungle." So in a way, people are always looking for that animal which is typical of a habitat, so that it becomes the keystone species, the flagship species. And that's what we wanted to push for the king cobra. And Agumbe became, the center of the work that we've done there over the last 20 years. And it just seems so appropriate. There are very few tigers or elephants in that wet forest there, but the king cobra is the one that stands out most. And what a perfect animal to be the flagship species. It really is.
You're such a champion, and this is what I just love about when I hear you speak, and I've heard you speak previously. You are such a champion for forests and rivers. Why,
Mm.
in your estimation, I mean, beyond the, of course, you need forests. Uh, why is it that we don't seem to be able to make that connection between forests, the health of forests, rivers, and life itself, and are so easy to confuse it with plantations or with planting a million trees in a day kind of thing,
Mm.
and also river linking or doing something like that because every river is the same in their estimation and it's just
Yeah.
water pipes. Why is it that we can't seem to, what's lost in our imagination where we're not able to fathom this absolutely these two absolutely gorgeous creatures which are very interlinked.
I think the problem is people haven't had the luck that we've had, those of us who have spent so much time in the forest. I one one thing that really sticks in my head as you were talking just now was going to, well, I did my schooling in Kodaikanal in the Palni Hills, and that's of course a lot of heavy development in Kodaikanal, but I spent most of my time out in the hills. And when I saw uh, the the moss on rocks above a shola. The shola, of course, is the forests that are in the clefts of the hills there.
Mm-hmm.
I would see water dripping
Mm-hmm.
from the moss.
Mm.
Like, I mean, they were sponges, the rains
Yes.
comes on for several months of the year, but these sponges absorb this and then drip down. And then as I was walking down, probably looking for pit vipers, so I'm looking and learning from the Irulas back home, back in Madras, I knew how to look very carefully for signs of snakes. So I was very, very observant. And then these little moss trickles, well, they turned into trickles. And this is at the top of the hills, okay? And the trickles sort of joined together, trickles coming from this side and started a small stream. And the stream, of course, is going to flow down. And then you look down below and there's a waterfall. And then below the waterfall, you start hearing real sounds. And there's bloody river down there. And where is it coming from? From that little moss on top. But then these guys were, cutting away a lot of these forests, and the streams were dry. So, and I was seeing the stream dry, and I was remembering, the love that I had, or the feelings that I had when I saw these little trickles turning into a river. And it just killed me to see what was happening, and the senselessness of it. And then later on, I got into sort of writing stuff, which, you're supposed to impress the public with what you found out. And it turns out that the Kaveri River, for example, has its origin, the Kaveri up
Right.
above Kurg.
Right.
And every river has its beginning up in some hill somewhere. And it's just obvious that forest is so essential for the sanctity of those rivers down there. I mean, not so much many of the North Indian rivers are totally rain-fed, and it's just hard to imagine how they continue to exist. The Chambal, for example, but they do. So, but I'm talking about these South Indian rivers and the rivers which definitely have their origin in the hills, which impressed me so much and still impresses me.
Yeah, you spoke about Talakaveri. I was there in 2015 with Neeti, by the way, Neeti Mahesh,
Hmm.
and Dylan Mandana, another guy. Do you know Mandana, Mandy?
Yeah, sure.
From Coorg, yeah. So we
Yeah.
were all together and we were going down the Kaveri at that time. And it was fascinating because in Talakaveri, you see that little spring that comes up and then it disappears, right? But
Yeah.
just at the bottom of that hill, you can see those rocks bleeding water
Yeah.
continuously. It's this massive sponge, right? Which is just
Yeah.
slowly, and then at that point it first comes out in this little trickle, and you can see the birth of, how it becomes a stream.
Absolutely.
And I think witnessing that really brings out the awe. And, like you said, temples, these are the places we should worship, and not
Yeah.
worship a deity, but worship the mountain, worship the moss and the
100%.
forests. And it's
100%.
just fascinating. Tell us, I know that you were at a point where you saw people who were conducting a survey who were going to build a dam in a very precious valley. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Okay. I was doing a lot of, mostly with one or two Irulas coming with me. We were doing a lot of Western Ghats trips, and I was collecting a lot of new specimens of well, not so many new species, but specimens of lizards and snakes. And I had heard about the various places I should be visiting. And one of these places has this evocative name of Silent Valley.
Mm.
That's a very evocative name. Yes, yes, must go there. So we drove. I had, in those days, the World Wildlife Fund had given me an old Willys Jeep, one of those old green Jeeps. It was incredible. four-wheel drive, man, driving in all these real rutted roads deep into the forest, and then we'd stop and camp there. So we drove down from Mukali to Silent Valley and drove down into the forest to the end where there was no more place where, no more road at all. But right at the end, there was a generator and some equipment and all this, and we heard a boom. And I was wondering what the hell is going on. So there was a young engineer there, and he says, "Oh, we are doing what's called seismic blasting." I said, "What are you doing? What is that for?" He says, "Well, in order to make a dam, you have to first make sure that the place that where you're going to make the dam, the rocks are, not fragile, that they will be, and by doing seismic blasting, we can find out if these rocks will in fact be okay, and then we can make the dam there." So I said, "What dam?" "Oh, you haven't heard. Oh, Silent Valley Dam is going to produce more megawatts of electricity than any other dam in Kerala." So there was this great thing. So yeah, imagine the shock. And what's going to happen? Oh, the dam will be from there to there, and all of this will go underwater. It'll be a beautiful reservoir. And some trees will remain, but most of this will be underwater. And I couldn't believe it. And this was 73 or 72, maybe. 73, I was writing notes for the World Wildlife Fund newsletter, they called it at that time. And so I wrote a note. I can't remember I don't think I said save Silent Valley. That kind of thing came later. But I did write a note about a one or two pager about Silent Valley and how impressed I was, and how can this go underwater? I mean, how can they do this? So it seems that started something. I mean, not necessarily what I did started something, but the public knowledge of that this beautiful rainforest was going to go underwater started a movement which could be called India's first real environmental movement. I'm not sure if that's even true, but the Chipko movements also happened around the same time. But certainly it was one of the first. And
Yeah.
it involved so many fantastic people all the way along. M.K. Prasad, M.S. Swaminathan, Sugata Kumari, the poetess. There's so many people got involved in this. And yeah, and it was declared a national park ultimately.
It's interesting. My father was part of that as well, way back then. Yes.
Fantastic. Can I
But
stop
it's
you for one moment?
Yeah.
There's somebody cutting a tree sorry?
Is it interfering with
Can you hear it? One sec. He stopped.
No, he's gonna do it.
It's going on now.
I can't hear it. Maybe because you have earphones on. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not sure. No.
Okay, as long as you're okay.
Stop.
It's one of the worst sounds. Even here, where I live, anytime I hear wood being chopped, that sound is
Yeah.
awful. It's viscerally painful. It's terrible.
Well, in this case, they're just cutting down old areca trees, so it's nothing,
Okay,
nothing serious.
cool. Yeah. Cool. Prem, sorry, we lost you again, and we went down another route.
No problem. Ron, you've been talking about a lot of the good interventions that you've been able to do over all this time. Whether it's the snake park, the crocodile bank, the gharial intervention, Silent Valley, whatever. In your early work on turtle hatchery, what did that teach you about the danger of doing good before understanding enough?
A very good point. Because, and I know what you're leading up to, when we were dumb, we thought, dumb in the sense that we were just going to do things, helter-skelter, collect the eggs, bury them in very similar circumstances to where the female laid her eggs. So we thought we were doing the right thing, laying making the holes about the same depth as she made them and putting the eggs in there. Then in the late 80s, early 90s, some studies came out saying that the sex of certain reptiles, including sea turtles, was determined by temperature, the sex of the hatchlings.
Mhm.
And this was unbelievable. We always thought it was something genetic and something that, wasn't certainly not related to something as simple as temperature. It turns out that crocodiles have the same thing, that warmer temperatures produce males and cooler temperatures produce females, which is related to this whole thing of global warming now, for example. I mean, your mind really starts rolling when you understand something like this. So we realized that, yes, we were perhaps hatching many thousands of baby sea turtles and letting them go. But what if they're all females, or what if they're all males? What if we're not getting the right? So the answer to that was very simple, of course, that we don't take the turtle eggs from the beach to a hatchery, but to protect them, you simply dig a hole just next to where the sea turtle laid her eggs, next to it meaning close by. So there's and you bury the eggs and make it untraceable for the egg poachers. So the egg poachers could find the sea turtle's nest because they can just see this tracks coming from the sea and the tracks going back to the sea, and they know right at the apex of that triangle, of that angle, they'll find the nest. So basically, that was the easiest solution, and hopefully it worked out. I mean, there's more sea turtles coming back, so that may be the proof of the pudding.
There's one other thread from earlier that I kind of saved in my head to get back to. Do you think that captive breeding actually saved the gharial, or did it merely postpone the moment when we've had to confront what we're actually doing to our rivers?
Well, it wasn't, technically speaking, captive breeding so much. We did captive breeding at the Madras Crocodile Bank, but the number of releases of captive bred gharial are nothing compared to the wild collected eggs, which were hatched in captivity. So that was the scheme which was proposed by a guy called Dr. Robert Bustard, who was the Food and Agriculture Organization expert who had come over from Australia to set up Project Crocodile in the mid-70s. So, and it worked a charm. And it's worked in several parts of the world to do the same thing. There were very few gharial left, but there were a few nests which were being collected, hatched in captivity, and the young released back to the wild. The survival rate of baby crocodilians is very, very low. They're tiny and they're very vulnerable. Birds of prey, even water birds like cranes and storks, just gobble them up. Catfish, eat them up. Turtles eat baby crocodiles. So yeah, they have a lot against them. So yeah, the not so much captive breeding, but the captive rearing to, let's say, about a meter length would help to bring the populations back, and it certainly did.
I think I was just thinking, Ram's 83, we've kept him for about the better part of 2 hours now. Do you want to take this on?
Let's move to your book.
Sure.
And I would love for you to read a little bit to us, Rom, if
I
you
will.
still have the energy to.
I do.
Please read from whatever part that you like, and for however long you want.
Snakes, drugs, and rock and roll, folks.
And please get the second one out fast, because
yeah,
and then the third.
Janaki, my lovely editor wife, is writer editor wife, is we've got the first draft done. So
Good.
now we've got to shave it into something. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Looking forward to that.
I was trying to make my way back to India, and the only way I could do it, I had tried many jobs in America by that time, which are all in this book. But the main job I had was being a snake catcher. So I got this order for rattlesnakes from Arizona. So I was in Arizona to catch snakes to send back to the Staten Island Zoo. I had to just make $500 in order to buy a ship ticket back to India. So I walked carefully across a massive rock slide This is in the mountains of southern Arizona, by the way, right near the Mexican border. Alert for the soft buzz of a small rattlesnake. At the first sound of one, I excavated the rocks, but the rattle grew fainter. The snake had retreated inside. I had to be faster next time. Careful not to start a landslide, I made my way. Another snake disappeared under a flat rock. On lifting the stone, I caught sight of a slate gray coil near my hand. Too late! The small lance-shaped head of a green rock rattler shot out and bit deep into my left thumb. You dumb shit, I berated myself. My thumb burnt like a hot iron drilling into flesh, as I said before. This was no dry bite. Although in pain, I wanted the snake. I grabbed it with my tongs and dumped it into a bag. Not knowing how bad the snake bite was going to be, I didn't waste my time in that remote spot and retraced my steps for the 3-hour hike back to Nell's barn where I was staying. Exhausted from the agony, I slumped beside a stream and drank deeply. I made an improvised sling with a snake bag from my throbbing hand and rested in the shade of a tree for a few minutes. The swollen thumb had turned blue like an overripe fruit, stiffened and oozed fluid from the puncture wounds. I wiped it with a damp handkerchief and tied it loosely around the bite to keep the flies away. My small medical kit contained no painkillers. I did, however, have a stash of marijuana. I tapped a thimbleful into a corncob pipe for a smoke. The familiar high took the edge off the agony. I felt better enough to continue on my way. About a mile later, I began sneezing nonstop, which made me even more tired. This was my allergy, okay? Then my armpits, crotch, and head started itching. I had no time to dwell on this new unfamiliar symptom of an allergic reaction to venom. The distance passed in a blur. The sneezing abated, but I continued to scratch as if bedeviled by fleas. A parked car stood in Nell's yard, and the sound of people's voices came from the house. If her guests saw my puffy face and snotty nose while I raked my privates like an uncouth simpleton, they would run a mile. I stumbled behind the barn without being spotted and sat under an apple tree with my back resting against the trunk. Sweat trickled from my brow, and my shirt was damp. I toked on my corncob pipe, which eased the pain. 2 snake bags stuffed with dry leaves made good pillows, and I stretched out. A troop of quadrumanies surrounded me, chewing on fallen apples. Am I hallucinating? The swelling had now reached the elbow. A dull ache pain throbbed my pulse, replaced the burning pain. I peeked around the barn. The car had left. I went up to Nell and said, and she looked very worried about my swollen hand. I said it was a tiny snake, I assured her. It couldn't be dangerous. The swelling has stopped. It's not even painful anymore. So she said, look, instead of sleeping in the barn, sleep in the house. So we had a sumptuous dinner, and at night, I got up in the pitch black darkness to take a leak, but I lost my balance and fell down. I was blind. 100 worries assailed me. Should I call for help? Am I dying? Nell, but I didn't want to bother her. So I had already worried her enough. An hour later, my vision started returning like an old TV set warming up. The night light and furniture were blurred at first, but they came back. Unsteadily, it turned up. I stood up and leaned against the wall. I woke to bird song and the morning sun streaming into the window. Yeah, that was quite an experience. Hey,
And that was the first bite.
that was the 3rd venomous bite that I had. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to read one part, which I just loved because of how you describe the landscape. Okay, so this part in the book comes soon after the police come and cart you to the escaped snakes scare, and you saw the folded bags, which was just hilarious, really hilarious. Anyway, all right. But the following weekend, Claire and I drove west with camping gear. At the stream bank, we spread out our double sleeping bag under the starlit sky, watching with wonder as clouds took form as we drifted to sleep. A thunderclap woke us, and I'm sorry, what happened here? Oops. A thunderclap woke us, and we dashed into the car in time before the rain came down in sheets. We dozed on and off, listening to the downpour drumming on the car as if trying to beat it to the ground. The next morning, after the sun warmed the stones, I scanned every sunlit spot on a slippery rock slide for a coiled rattlesnake. My ears were alert for the telltale sounds of castanets. Claire walked on the trail below me. "Rom, come quick," she called. "Snake!" She stood beside the stream holding an empty canteen. I scampered across the loose rocks to where she was pointing. "An Arizona mountain king snake!" I exclaimed. I picked up the 3-foot beauty with its alternating bands of red, white, and black. It is a serious contender for the title of the most beautiful snake in the world. "Look at the color pattern," I urged. "Red on black, it's okay, Jack. That's the king snake here. But if it's red on white, it's going to bite, and that's a deadly coral snake." "Rom, you're so smart," she said sarcastically. "I could get $25 for it, a fantastic start to the weekend." At noon, we drove to Nell's place to meet Dick, and I'll skip that part. Then you go to the giant pines, which kept the canyon cool. We reached our destination, the Hamburg silver mine, which had been deserted since the turn of the century. It was one of 2 locations in the States where the rarest rattlesnake, Willard's rattler, lived. Working our way slowly through the scattered remains of dwellings, neither of us was hopeful of finding one. Just poking around made me feel like a kid again. I entered the sturdier quarry shifts where outcrops of gorgeous quartz crystals, some a foot long, glimmered in the light. But there were no snakes. At the ruins of a crumbling settlement, I rummaged through the trash heap for bottles to add to Nell's collection. We continued onward beyond Hamburg, past the remains of a corral in a spacious grassy opening. Down at Bear Spring, while filling my canteen, I spotted a rattlesnake unlike any other. An adult Willard's crawled unhurriedly on the cool pine needles. I lifted it on the snake hook and yelled over my shoulder to Dick. Setting the rusty-hued beauty in the center of the trail, I photographed it while he made sure it didn't disappear. I became emotional finding this rare creature in such beautiful surroundings. And then we found 2 gorgeous juvenile Willard's rattlers that were too young to keep. Everything about that day seemed magical. I love that part because also of that last but one line, that were too young to keep. So while you describe yourself as a hunter and all of that, there's clearly a sense of responsibility and a sense of, moral accountability. You do not collect young snakes.
Yeah, that's okay. But I said that king snake is going to get me $25. That.
But you let it go, didn't you? Or did you collect it?
Of course I did.
Yeah. So that's very interesting because here, and this is, I want to round this off and bring this to the end by, addressing this whole fear factor of snakes. It's for people like Prem and I, we love snakes and we have absolutely no problem with it. And we're just fascinated by it. And it's pure fascination. But I live in a community, which is a gated community. Jerry has actually come here and he's done a survey over here to just see, what we can do to lessen. I had a Russell's viper coiled on the other side of a glass door. What a beauty. It was about 7 feet long, massive. It hissed when it was, the guy who came to collect it. Yeah, but it was very, very beautiful. Anyway, so I live in a community where fear rules. They get afraid even of keelbacks and, the other day. So I made up a thing where I said, if it's got a stripe, it's the harmless type. If it's clean, then it's a venomous queen to kind of distinguish between the rat snake and a cobra, because otherwise people are like, oh yeah, it's just a rat snake. I'm like, how do you know? Did you see it? No, it's smaller than a cobra, and so it's a rat snake. I'm like, it doesn't work that way, So all kinds of things. So anyway, but how? And this is something that I'm really grappling with, and I always ask for herpetologists to come speak to our people and stuff like that, but it doesn't really help. How can we convert almost fear to at least tolerance and fascination, because otherwise we are constantly getting snakes rescued from our
Yeah.
place and left. And like you mentioned earlier in this conversation, when it's relocated to an unfamiliar place, it's probably going to die.
Yeah. Yeah, we debate this all the time. I mean, Jerry, myself, and we've got a small gang who are trying to do stuff like my friend, very good friend, Jos Luis, who's now head of WTI, is from Kerala, and he got the Kerala Forest Department under some really good stuff. Rescuers have to be trained, they have to have an ID card, they have to do the right thing. One of the right things is to convince people, look, this is a non-venomous snake. He probably has lived here 10 years. You just saw him because he happened to come into your house, but he is very important, he or she, as a rodent eater. So if it's a rat snake or a checkered striped keelback vine snake, we are going to leave it just outside your house in your garden. And of course, to convince them of that takes a while. But if Ajay Giri in Agumbe and our people there have convinced people to the extent that people will call up and say, there's a king cobra in my garden, but don't bother coming. If he comes in the house, I'll call you back. Now this is miles ahead of what it used to be. You would catch one. Yeah, and the follow-up is if they do catch it if Ajay has to go and take it out of their house or their cow shed, he'll say, look, I know you know this already, but I'm not going to take it far away into the forest because it's not living in the forest. It lives in this agricultural area. And again, it's lived here so long and you've only seen it because it came here. It's not going to hurt you. If it's okay, I'm just going to leave it a few hundred yards away. And invariably, the people are okay with that. Plus, you say, and also, if there's a cobra or a viper around, the king cobra will eat it. And people
I know.
what?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well, I don't have the luxury of having a king cobra here in Bangalore, but that's what I tell them. I'm like, anyways, if you take out one snake, another will take its place. And, it might be a venomous one. Exactly. That's exactly what I try to tell them.
Okay, no, these
Anyway.
are the things we're doing. And
Yeah.
I think getting the rescuers to be educationists and to be doing things in the right way, not, performing, kissing them on the,
Oh,
putting
we
it.
have some of those that come and then they'll be like waving it around, and then it's crazy because
Yeah.
it could be harmful to them
Oh, yeah.
themselves, right? I
You know
mean,
how many have been killed? There's dozens of these young snake rescuers have been killed by just screwing around.
it's
Yeah,
crazy.
so it's happening. Hey, in the old days, everyone would just say, kill the snake. So nowadays, things have gone to one level, okay, call the rescuer. So things are getting better.
Yes.
That's all I got to
True.
say. I'm positive about it.
And just to get your last thought on it, at 83, what remains unfinished other than your books?
That's the primary thing right now. Yeah, no, I've been concentrating on the snake bite mitigation thing. I just felt, I mean, from the beginning, it's never left actually, this part of getting people to understand that snakes aren't out to get you, but if you do get bitten, it is a serious thing and you got to do something about it. So I'm one of the tacts that I've been using, of course, are the people who like snakes, the organizations and so on. The first question is, do you like snakes? Oh, yes, we like them. Then let's do something about snake bite, because that's the only way we're going to change people's attitudes. If people knew that they could get access to antivenom, if they knew that they could, by just using a mosquito net at night and using a torch at night, they could eliminate or at least bring down the number of snake bites. All this, it is helping, it's working, but still thousands of people are dying from snake bite. And,
Yeah.
getting the word out to 500 million farmers around the country and their families is not an easy job. So yeah, it requires funds and money has to go into it. So there's several very good CSR funders who have helped make this happen. And there are a lot of organizations, a lot of NGOs are onto it too. So I'm very positive about it, but lots to be done. Then I'm
Graham?
getting old, so come on, you youngsters, get out there and do it.
No, seriously. I agree with you. I mean, it is the human wildlife conflict that is probably not spoken about as much as some of the other big charismatic animals are spoken
you
about.
kidding? I mean, look at the numbers. You can take
I
all
know.
the people who are killed by all the big animals in the world,
I know. Yeah,
and it doesn't even approach the number of killed just in India alone. I mean,
correct.
hello, you guys.
I
And
know.
we've got such a bizarre country. All these species who are killing people are highly protected species. I mean, people from the outside looking at us and wondering, how can you protect animals? I mean, I'm very happy they're protected, but on the other hand, let's do something about it. So the government has a lot to answer for. And I know we've hammered the government a couple of times in this podcast already, but this is really something that they have to wake up. A lot has happened, by the way. And thanks to some of the work that we're doing and our colleagues are doing, the government has a national action plan for to prevent snakebite envenomation. Every state has a nodal officer who is responsible for implementing this. And hospitals are now, and the antivenom production and distribution is getting regularized to the degree. We produce the cheapest antivenom in the world, okay?
Mm.
In India, you can buy an ampule of antivenom for less than 1,000 rupees. In the United States, it'll cost you over $1,000 an ampule. So, hey, we're on the right track. We just got a lot more to do. And now there's a lot of good people who are also making it happen. Yeah.
That's great. And just one last, I lied that was the last question. This is the last question. Of your own successes, which would you judge the most critically?
So when you say critically, am I supposed to be negative or positive?
Just that, there are things that went right, went wrong, but most,
Uh, Probably the Snake Park and Croc Bank and their educational program and the spin-off of the people who have come there and given that opportunity for the first time in their lives to do stuff hands-on with reptiles is probably the best thing that I could have ever done.
And what would you have done differently?
Well, with the constraints that our government puts on us, for example, we could have done many, many more things very differently if we could have gotten permissions, for example. We wanted to collect samples of snake venom from every state in the country, and it would take 2 to 3 years to get the permission to collect 1 ml, 1 milliliter of venom from a snake in West Bengal, for example. That the papers would just go back and forth, and why are you doing this? Nasha ke liye. These guys, they, they just don't understand how important it is to do the research. And this is still today. We've got a wonderful Wildlife Act, the Wildlife Protection Act of 72, which was just revised recently. But by protecting animals at the highest degree of protection, that means you can't touch them. You cannot research them. Now, this does not make sense. This is not good conservation. It's not good management. It's not good sense. So things have to change. And yeah, I mean, I'm just one lonely voice. But yeah, there's so much more could be done with a better collaboration with our government authorities.
Great. Prem, anything else? Any last thoughts?
No, like I said, we've kept Rom.
Yes, we've kept him long enough. Rom, thank you so much for this time.
Thank you. And yeah, by the way, if people are going to buy
Yeah,
snakes, drugs, and rock and roll, I would love it if they put a little, Goodreads review, a 2 or 3 liner, so that more people can read about the stuff we're doing.
I
And
will do that myself as well.
great. The second and third volumes are going to be exciting too, by the way. So
I know, we're
this,
looking forward to it. Hurry up already.
yeah, this was only the first 24 years of my life, so
I
we've got
know, I know. I was so disappointed with it. I was like, no, I want more. So
It's coming.
yes, and please hurry up.
Yeah. Good.
And thank you so much for all the good work that you do. I mean, it is such a misunderstood species, and thank you and not just the snake, but also the crocodilians and the turtles. And I mean, it's just how many, while you were talking through this conversation, I realized how many species you've touched. Wow. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, usually people research one, kind of species in their lifetime, and you have affected change in the perception also of so many. Thank you so much for what you do. We are forever indebted in India. Thank you for being this proud Indian who saves Indian snakes and all of that stuff. It's just so good. And
Just
thank you for
remember,
coming
everybody,
on.
I'm having a very good time doing all this. So, I mean, it's,
I know. And that's the fun part, right? You're just so easy about it. You're like a real
Oh,
rock
yeah.
star. You're the rock star.
It's just so much fun. I mean, what can I say? Good. Lovely talking about both of you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ron. Thank you so
Thanks so
much.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, recording. So that was Rom Whitaker. And it was a fascinating conversation. And oh my God, the man still has energy to talk for so long, no?
Yeah, I was one of the things that I remember is, remember before the recording, we had said Rom is 83, we'll need to take breaks and all that. As it turns out, I'm the one who needed breaks, not him.
And then of course there were the forced breaks because of the
Yeah.
power outages. Oh my God, which is
But
just
that Rom could sustain, and he looked as fresh at the end as he did at the beginning.
yeah, amazing, really amazing. And you know what? I really loved the part where he told us about the Irulas settlements. When I asked him about mapping and how the
Mhm.
Irulas map the world, their map, that is, not our maps of their world, but their own maps of the world. And he said that was something that struck him the first time. When you see an Irula settlement, there are so many paths leading up to it and away from it, right? So these guys, each time they come to their house or their settlement, they're taking a different path, right? And the reason is simple. If you keep walking the same path, what are you going to see? Right? So amazing. And I think that is an essential part of how people who live with the land see the land. It's not a one and done thing, you know. And unfortunately for us, the roads that we build and it's completely contrary to that. But it's a lovely description of a way of moving through the land, and also a proxy for Rom's life itself, right? He began with snakes, yes, sure, but he never really remained confined to them. They were always a part of his life and they always intersected it. But he followed them into farms, into forests, labs, hospitals, knowledge systems, all of that. And then he went looking for king cobras, right? So he goes into the Western Ghats and he finds this absolutely magical place where he sets up a research station. And he always says he's not a scientist, but still he does so much science just by following the scientific method, which is, I mean, that's just brilliant. And of course, the danger, occupational danger that he faces at every point. I think he bears the scars in his body of
Yeah.
all of that, and his body remembers, it keeps score. But his mind, oh my God, you know, they're running in all these different directions. And I feel he truly cares about the land and all the denizens on it. I mean, it's palpable when he speaks, that passion just bursts out of him, right? And he is, I think, the epitome of someone who wants to save a species, yes, but more importantly, save the world that sustains that species. You know, whether it's a landscape, whether it's a forest, whether it's a single river, whether it's whatever, right? He's very much somebody who sees the bigger picture.
And I'm glad you picked up on that line about, if you walk the same path, what are you going to see? You're going to see the same things. Because that, if margin lands needed a motto, that would probably be it, right? I mean, it's the working principle that hopefully uh, we try to inculcate to whatever extent possible. But yeah, Ron takes it to another level. Also, I'm glad that he went into specifics about the institutions that he has created, the Snake Park, the Crocodile Bank, the Irula Cooperative, the Agumbe Rainforest Research Station. Because that is when that point strikes home that these institutions matter not just for the animals they protect, which is important, but for the people they produced, which is a point that we made earlier before we started recording. And then Rom being Rom, he went into specifics about who, what happened, what did they become, all of that, right? These institutions, they made room for curiosity to become knowledge, for knowledge to become a life's work, and that's brilliant. And But all that said, it's like you said, it was a free-flowing conversation. Rom is a master storyteller, so there's no problem about that. All you had to do was give him a cue and he takes off. But what is interesting is that for an 83-year-old looking back at his career, the the top note was not really nostalgia, it was urgency. Because
Mm.
he was pointing to the fact that India still loses roughly 50,000 people a year to snake bite, which is more than road accidents, it's more than, most other forms of death. And he made the point that antivenom science has moved beyond the old assumptions on which much of our systems still rest. In fact, he discounted thoroughly the big four concept that we have when it comes to venom extraction and use. Uh, he made the point that indigenous knowledge is disappearing even as modern science is slowly recognizing its value, which, I mean, again, which is an underlying theme of margin lands ever since Chatar Singh and conserving water. Uh, he made the point that researchers have been struggling for years to secure permission to perform the work that conservation itself depends on. And finally, the Great Nicobar, a living forest, coral reefs, nesting beaches, indigenous homelands, all of them being weighed against a project of almost unimaginable scale, yes, but also unquantifiable good. Because all we're hearing is that, yeah, this will happen, that will happen, we'll become whatever it is. But none of that is quantifiable. The loss is quantifiable, the gain is not. And Rom actually chose to describe such landscapes as places of worship. And he does that not because the science is unimportant, but because science in itself cannot answer the fundamental question: what are we willing to destroy in order to gain something?
You
And
know, this whole thing about the worship part, right?
Mhm.
I am so with him on that,
Yeah,
because when he talks about landscapes as places of worship, uh, what do we worship? We usually worship something that gives us sustenance, something that saves us, something that protects us, something that allows us to live, something that gives us hope, right? All of the above don't rest in idols. They don't rest in
yeah,
stone edifices. They rest in the land and in um, landscapes, you know. And I feel that that is what we have gone so far away from, not just in city life, but in general in our life. The way, I hate to say this, but organized religion has taken over. We've lost that connection to what really sustains us. And I guess I'm going to be dinged by people who listen to this when I say this, but I feel it's really true. We have really lost the plot. And Rom, in such a gentle manner, brings that out, where he says that these are our temples. And I keep thinking temples of modern India, and Nehru, of course, who revised his thing about dams being temples of modern India. He came back to say it's a disease of gigantism, which nobody knows about. Unfortunately, they only remember the first part. But those temples of modern India, temples of any modern civilization, really should be our landscapes.
yeah. And see, I mean, when Rom talks about these places as places of worship, you hear it without context and you tend to wince. But it occurs to me that every single ancient religion that
Yeah,
has antiquity
yeah.
sustaining it, where did it begin? It began with nature worship.
Obviously, yeah. I mean, that's the whole point, right? Why do people, this goes back to the conversation we had with Vishwanath the other day. Um, wasn't that the previous episode? Yeah, the previous
Yeah.
episode. I'll link to it. Where we talk about uh, worshipping the people who have recognized how the land works and built accordingly.
Hmm.
And we now do not know how the land works.
Yeah.
We just build over and above. I mean, what is happening? Just look around us, right? I live in Bangalore, and just look at Bangalore, right? How it's been built. And it all comes down to that same thing, yeah. The fact that the ancients read the land And there are a few ancients still alive today. I think I'll call Chatar Singh a living fossil, unfortunately, right now, because that's literally what he is. Very few of them left, but they are the ones who can read the land, and they are the ones, Irulas, like he talked about, Rom talked about. And the people who can read the land, who recognize that there are um, certain roles even a rock plays, right? In the landscape. Remove that rock and you're going to get different things happening there, right? People who can recognize that versus people who think, hey, it's a rock. So what? Look at this banjar zameen, let's just change,
Mm.
right? I just wish somehow we could reclaim that ancient ethic, land ethic,
Yeah.
which allowed resilience to thrive. I mean, it's so resilient, yeah, the land. It is going to come back. It knows, these people know how to, they've seen changes over time, no? And
Yep.
they built accordingly. They built for, oh, what if this happens? Then this overcompensated in terms of water security, food security. They realized, and we've lost that. And I think maybe it's, I don't know, modern education systems or whatever it was, or borrowed education systems that don't fit our
Yeah.
situation. Anyway.
Yeah, true. I mean, in another context, we were talking about a particular river and its origin and all that. Remember of uh, not the recorded conversation, one of the conversations we were having recently, and the source of that river is a place of worship, as many rivers actually. It's not just one river. Most of our rivers, the source becomes something that we worship, and they knew at that time that this river would sustain them, and therefore its origin is something to be worshipped, venerated, protected, all of that.
You
And that's
made a very important point right there. I'm going to stop you because we can't stop at worship. Lots of things are still being worshipped.
yeah,
Ganga is being worshipped. Is it being protected?
yeah,
Is it being respected? Nah. Elephants are still being worshipped. But are
yes.
they protected? Are their corridors protected? We have lost that connection of, what is it that, so it's become these symbolic protection. Worship is still there, but the connection to real life and the connection to protection is gone, right? That
Mhm.
there's no connection between worship and respect anymore.
Yeah.
Worship and preservation anymore. We've lost that. We still worship, but we don't make that connection.
Both of us are going to get dinged for this one, but that's okay. And I mean, you think of what we've been speaking about all this time, and maybe that is what a lifetime like Rom's, a lifetime that is spent, looking closely at things, actually teaches
Yeah,
that paying attention is not merely a scientific method; it is a moral act.
yeah.
And sometimes to see what is truly there, we must leave the familiar role and take another path. For me, that would be the takeaway from this entire episode, or one takeaway from this entire episode. But for me, the most important one, because it's a way of thinking, of seeing, of experiencing.
I
Anyway,
think, isn't that a sentence from Margin Lands also?
yes,
One of the most difficult things is to see what is actually there.
yes.
Hmm. Yeah, it
So,
really is. That paying attention is a moral act. That is so true. And by the way, about getting dinged, we this whole conversation is not against a government. It's against a mindset.
correct.
All the governments are party to that same mindset that we are railing against. It's not against any one government. We're not anti-national. We're not anti one government. This is not it. We are pro life and life for all, right? Equal equal opportunities, a dignified life for all. And
And
that
when you
won't
say
come if you
life for
don't.
all, I mean, it also includes not just animals that we're talking about, also the landscapes, the rivers, the mountains, the
Yeah.
trees, the
Yeah,
forests,
yeah,
all, right?
yeah. I mean, everything, right? It's all connected. So there's a story in Margin Lands where I talk about how when you remove a boulder from Arunachal Pradesh's rivers,
Yeah,
how things change in Assam, and it
yeah,
causes a flood which is not expected in Assam. I mean, not expected in that sense, we're carrying that load, right? These connections are real, yeah. They're not imaginary. And to
Hmm.
say you're anti-national, if you destroy amazing farmlands, isn't that anti-national? I mean,
Yes.
it's so strange. And this has got nothing to do with the current government. This has all got to do with our Britishers
Historically.
on. Britishers
Yeah.
on, right? Everything. It's just a mindset. And the mindset, in opposition to that, the mindset of people who actually live with the land, they recognize how these things are connected.
Actually, even this Britishers point came up, right, in the conversation with Rom when he pointed out that the present problem with the gharials dates back to the British because they saw it as vermin, crocodiles,
Exactly.
gharials.
Oh, all of them, right? They
Yeah.
had bounties on
Yeah.
tigers, and every predator, they had a bounty on its head. I mean, the numbers, I actually give this talk when I do the National Geographic expeditions. I give a talk about what wildlife was like uh, pre 17, 1800s. And then
Hmm.
once the Raj took over, what happened to the wildlife and how it changes. Very similar to and drawing upon a lot of the work of Divya Banu Singh and Raza Kazmi and all these people. And it's stunning, right? The changes, the mindset change is stunning. We always killed animals to and raised forests to settle. That's not the point. It's just the scale and the thinking that came in, which was hugely. I mean, it's still prevalent, I guess. We still have vermin status for a lot of creatures, and it's a tough one. Yeah, it's not. I don't know how we can change this mindset of people when the city life and the people in power really don't come into contact with nature anymore. They've walled themselves into bubbles and, walled bubbles. I know I'm mixing metaphors here. You must be cringing, but anyway, never mind. I'll let it be.
Besides the cringing, I also suddenly realized who one of the future guests has got to be, and that is this person I know called Kumar Rao. I'm
Hmm?
going to get you to, yeah, I'm going to get you to do that talk,
Which one?
the one you just talked about. Because why is that not part of Madin? But that's for another day. For now, for
Oops.
now, yeah.
Suddenly, I remembered of a time at when I was at Intel, and there was this. Intel had a culture, very strong internal culture, corporate culture, where one of the things was if you come up with a problem, you own the solution to. You got to go and try and solve it.
Yeah.
Oops. Next time I'll be careful what I say.
But anyway, so folks, that was Rom Whitaker. And as always, do let us know what you make of this episode. You can contact us individually, Aarti on Instagram, me on Twitter. There is the email ID, marginlands@gmail.com. Uh, if you haven't subscribed already, do subscribe. If you have subscribed and not hit the bell icon, maybe you should, because that icon will remind you when future episodes drop. And what else? I think
If you
that's
like this episode, share it with somebody you think will like it as well. It's about it's about, I think, just spreading awareness, really, with respect to something as misunderstood as snakes and these creatures, which are so vital in uh, keeping rats in check. I mean, just think about, I think that was, we kind of glossed over it maybe because all of us just understood it. But imagine removing snakes from um, our world, our small worlds, even just removing it even from a community. Um, there's going to be famine because the rats are going to take over, and you're not going to have any checks. So there's these kinds of connections, which if you think somebody will be interested or somebody needs to know, please do share an episode. And I do have a new Substack. I'm going to plug that. I've just started it. There's only a welcome note, but I'm going to make another note today, and it's got to do about rivers and maps. So by the time this episode comes out, hopefully that's on my Substack already. But please check that out as well. We will link to it. Um, and Prem has an amazing Substack with some excellent craft essays, which I think everybody needs to read because communication is key. And he talks about how to communicate in eight, I think, right? How many
Mhm.
essays? Eight. Eight
Right.
essays now, each one dealing with a um, different aspect of craft, or the craft of writing, and or even just storytelling. It's not just writing; it's storytelling, and it's fantastic. I know I'm plugging this in almost all of our episodes, but it is
Yeah.
vital. It's vital because I feel youngsters today um, can really benefit from those. I'm just going to say that because I know I can these days, my God, Prem, I can just spot an AI paragraph from a mile away these days, and it's awful. They're just cookie cutter, yeah.
Yeah.
There is nothing there which actually surprises you, makes you sit up. In fact, when I start reading that, I'm just like, oh, forget it. I'm not even going to read it. This person's used AI. It's yuck.
And the irony is, AI is merely reproducing what we wrote. It's not like it's invented something new and therefore we need to
Yeah,
climb
it's a
out.
rehash of
Yeah,
ideas. It's
exactly.
everything. It's just anyway, that's really it's sad because the whole point of a human writing is are the idiosyncrasies, are those thoughts in that person's head, which can never be exactly replicated. Whereas this stupid creature goes and does the same thing over and over. And anyway, sorry, another soapbox.
Anyway,
These days I hear that, I have stopped using. Uh, so, what do you think Turkey is about? Not this, not that, but this. And that's like, oh God, classic, classic
yeah, but
AI.
I mean, since we got on the subject, it's kind of unrelated to what we do on margin lands, but it's worth pointing out that now kind of reverse censorship is coming into our own work. And I'm not the only one feeling it. I've heard others say the same thing, that some of these things that have been identified as AI ticks, the use of the M dash, the use of the thesis, antithesis, not this but that framing,
Yeah,
the use of tricolons, for instance, the
yeah,
tripits,
yeah, yeah.
all of these. Now anybody sees it in any piece of writing, and you immediately get, this guy used AI. What and so I know people who actually go out of their, it comes instinctively. I mean, I've been using tricolons and M dashes and all that ever since I learned
I
it.
learned it from you, dude. Now I
Yeah.
have to unlearn.
No, you don't. That's my point. That, see, this comes
No, see, it's a
instinct.
question about how it's done. When you read AI writing, it's done in a very particular fashion,
Yeah,
which
I
when you
agree.
can make out when a person has used it on their own, and it's a very different way of writing that.
Yeah, I agree. And my limited point is that, see, this comes from the way we think, the way we process information, the way that information comes back onto the page, all of that dictates how we write. Now, if because of some external factor, like, oh, is this written by AI, what we're doing is we are suppressing our own instinctive writing.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing because it changes a voice that all of us have spent years, you know, building and getting to some point that sort of matches the way we think. And yeah, that's something that I would caution against, that don't change your form of writing because people will think it's AI.
But I would say I would take the opposite tact and I say that adaptation is the name of the game. And if you need to make a change, you need to make a change. I mean, it's happened with photography, right? It's happened with so many other places where you realize that, okay, you need to develop something else. You need to go beyond something, a particular way of saying it. Yeah, I'm not saying stop using it completely, but if it means that you need to give a little more thought to how you use and how often you use the tricolon or the M dash or whatever, use it. Because if it's used in a intelligent way, truly you can tell that it's used in an intelligent way. It's not AI, you know. But yeah, okay, we're slightly differing on these things. I would defer to you on that because you're obviously guru. But
Uh,
for me, I'm still I'm still learning, and for me, my instinct is to check myself and
hmm,
use a different method of saying something, which is always also valid. So
sure. Anyway,
anyway,
having digressed at considerable length, we'll just come back to. So, guys, the focus is on Rom Whitaker, that episode. So, again, tell us what you think, and we will see you a fortnight from now with our next episode.
yes, and one last plug for Rom's first part of the book, for first part of his autobiography, the first book, which is called Snakes, Drugs, and Rock and Roll by Romulus Whitaker and Janaki Lenin. And with that, goodbye and see you in 2 weeks. Ta-ta.